Hello everyone, I am currently testing for homework 3. The test cases I had, or user stories I also had to implement, was pretty much the user, instructor, and the reviewer interactions. I had to implement the entirety of reviewer. As for instructor and user, it's just simply interacting between two. The user needs to be able to request to become a reviewer, and the instructor will be the one that approves that request. There's a interaction between the two, sending a request over and then back when it is approved or denied, one of the two. And then the reviewer class is capable of seeing all answers from any question at all and being able to input a review of the answer, be that good, bad, add suggestions, whatnot, and so on. For right now, I'm just going to show you a quick test case scenario of what I have. I'm going to go ahead and run it just to show you that it is indeed working. So here we go. Test cases. Once it runs, it should go through without any issues. And there we go. All 5 test cases have been run properly, and I added little comments here and there to show that it has indeed ran, including with the name of the test and then if the test passes or fails at the very end there. So these test cases are pretty simple, or simple in concept, pretty hard in actually implementing all of them. Because I wanted to use JUnits, which are just automated tests essentially, I needed to work with our current database helper and the way we've structured it entirely. And unfortunately, our current delete class that we use to delete users and whatnot is not quite set up properly. It has problems being deleting a user when it has dependencies. So for example, if there's a question attached to it or an answer or whatnot, it just simply can't be deleted. And I've tried to go in and change it, but with my current time constraints, I just couldn't do anything about it. So I went ahead and just did a little cleanup, as you can see here under the before all, is that it just goes through and just deletes all current review requests, answer reviews, answers, and questions. Unfortunately, it does have an adverse effect of deleting questions that regular users have submitted in the program. But for the case of this homework, it is something that I simply had to deal with just because I did not have enough time to properly fix the issue. Further down the program here, this was me trying to get the delete user input after each test so I could reset it. Eventually I just couldn't do that. That's why you see the user already exists. So I'll show you here in a second, which was essentially an if statement that checked if the user was already in the database or not, because I ran into a problem when if there was already a user, it would try to plug it in and it would just create an error when it would fail the test immediately. So I had to create an if else check statement there. So for our test 1, we have student submits a review request. It's pretty self-explanatory. The test is going to go ahead and create a user account. Then it will go ahead and try and request to become a reviewer to an instructor. The instructor doesn't have to exist because it can be accessed by any instructor. It's just attached to the instructor role. So right here, we have our current little if statement that I was talking about. It is going to try and create a user. Once it has been created, it will check if the user exists. If it doesn't exist, it will go ahead and insert it into the database. And it'll give us a little indication saying that it has been indicated if it has been inserted successfully. If it already exists, it'll just give us the use already exist output or message. I'm sorry, which you see here. Then we're going to go ahead and move further down. This right here is going to be accessing our database submit review request that I created, which sends that request over. I'll show you guys here in a second once I'm done with this test. A slight problem that I have here, which you'll see in this comment. And at the very end is simply the test case itself. It's checking 2 verifications. It's checking to see if the request has been sent and if there's the pending tag on that request. And if we scroll up in our console command, you'll see this big error which doesn't fail the test. I tried pretty hard to try and diagnose what was going on here. Here it says that it's a public violation of the CSE360 users, which is our user database that stores all users regardless of the role. But the problem is that I can't seem to get that fixed since it says that the reviewer already exists. Oh no, that's for a different test. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That's for a different test. Ignore what I'm saying so far. We'll get back to that here in a second. Forgive me. Test 2, the instructor retrieves pending review request is pretty self-explanatory as well. It will go ahead and create a user and an instructor. The user will send the request, and the instructor will just see if that request is pending or not. As you can see, I have that same if statement set up so that I can catch both the instructor and the user to see if they exist or not. And then from there, it's a very simple request trying to see if that pending is visible to the instructor side of the equation instead of the user side. There's a very big difference. The first one was for the user, the second one is for the instructor. Cool. Here you can see the Boolean found is directly attached to the user because the pending request can't exist without a user. That's why it's there. And then from the instructor side, it's just checking to see if it exists or not. All right, test 3 is the instructor approves the request. This is a follow-up to the second test, which is simply approving. Now we know that it exists. The request is currently in the database and is currently pending for a approval or denial from the instructor. So it will create a user and an instructor again. It'll go through the same steps it did before, where it submits a review, blah, blah, blah. And right here at the very end, we have the approval request. So essentially just says that the instructor has gone in and has approved the request. And in doing so, it has changed the role of the user, or not changed, has added the role reviewer, which is the very last check right here, which is just checking to see if that user indeed has the review role attached to him, which it does, as we can see further down here. Here, instructor can approve requests. Both have passed. As you can see, the little pass statement here. And then reviewers can review can create a review. Sorry. All right. Here we simply have one individual, which is going to be the reviewer being created here. And then we have created the review, which is test reviewer 2. And this is where that problem arises here, which is saying that I have a violation of users here. However, the test still goes through just fine. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. What's probably happening, now that I think about it, is that we haven't ever tested a user existing without the user tag before, which is what might be flagging here. So it's checking to see if the user has the user tag, otherwise it can't be a user, regardless of their roles, which is probably what's flagging it. But the test works just fine and it's working as intended, so I'm not going to bother fixing it at the moment. As you can see, it's checking to see if the individual exists, and then we insert them into this insert user that you guys have been seeing, or you've been seeing, is a helper tester class that I put into the database that just does some quick inserts of the users and all that, so it doesn't quite clutter it all. I was thinking of doing the same for this if check statement, but time constraints happen. It was just a lot easier to copy and paste everything down real quick. Which is counterintuitive now that you think about it, because classes should alleviate that problem, but I'm really tired and I have a lot of work to do. So I just kind of brute forced it. Further down the line, we're going ahead and creating a question here. So once the question has been created, it's also checking to see if the question exists or not. So we're into a problem where when the question did indeed exist already, it would flag and not crash, but it would fail the test essentially right away because it couldn't properly input the question, which had the sample text that was trying to be analyzed at the very end for our for our test parameters here. So I had to make sure that it was indeed existed or not. If it did already exist, that means I've already ran the program once, so the test is currently in place. If it doesn't exist, then I would have to go in and change it all. It would then create it all. I'm sorry, change it, create it all, including the sample test. Now, if we go further down here, we are now creating our answers for the reviewer. So this is the answer that's going to be attached to the question, which is what the reviewer will see when they're reviewing it. Next, we have the same checks for the answers. And at the very end, we have our review. Now we're currently creating the review for it. And here I have just a random, I went ahead and set up a random ID for the review question so that I don't have to bother making sure that it is properly set up, since in this case, it doesn't really matter what the ID is, since the ID will be unique in every case. I could have just done what I did earlier, which was set it up, but I wanted to try and make it so that it was random every time to make sure that the case would be caught, the test case would be caught if it was a different test case. That way I didn't run it once and it works, which is what I implemented here is. So here we're going through. It's just making sure that that the next statement is indeed a review, and from there it's checking to see if it is from the reviewer, and then it's checking to see what was implemented, which this is a test review, which as you can see here is this is a test review. Oop. And as you can see, it has caught that, so it works just fine as we have passed it. And at the very end, we have retrieve all reviews for an answer. This one is pretty easy. It's pretty much the step 4, but this time we're adding multiple reviews so that we can see if the database is populating properly, because the reviewer should be able to see many different reviews and answers. So that's what this is all about. I'm going to skip through the top part, which is essentially just creating the question, creating the user, all of that. We've already seen all of that, including the answer. And here we are creating the two random, the two reviewer questions. Sorry, I said random because I saw the random UID. And as you can see, we got both of them, and then we're checking to see if they do indeed exist as the first review and second review, which they do, and they indeed pass. So with everything passing, that's my test cases, all 5 of them that have been implemented for the user stories that I needed to do. Hopefully you guys, hopefully this is helpful, and I didn't skip over or go too quick over anything. This is honestly a lot more work than I was expecting, but it was nice to try and implement the JU unit. I would recommend, if any reviewer sees this and they have any input about how the class is set up, to please somehow get away from Eclipse. I had created way more headaches than I needed to get JUnit to work properly in this current setup. Otherwise, it was a good experience. Will I ever use JUnit again? I'm not entirely sure. I find it a lot easier just running the program and seeing what works and doesn't work, and instead of trying to create a whole setup, essentially a whole new program that tests everything. It's very cumbersome when it's a lot easier just to hit run and go from there. However, I can see these being a lot more useful if you're doing very unique test case scenarios. But even then, it's like, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. That was it. Hope this was useful for you guys and it wasn't too long.